Welcome to In Focus. In April 2017, the federal government introduced legislation to legalize and regulate recreational cannabis, commonly called marijuana. With this new law, there's a commitment to ensure it remains a carefully controlled substance with strict rules to protect young people. But there are unforeseen problems with this law. A certain sense of apathy also is connected. With more on this and this subject and what it means to us, Faytene Grasseschi is here in focus, and she's been tracking the progression of this legislation and has a few updates for us today. Welcome.
Hey, great to be here.
Oh,
it's always good.
Every time we see you, we know you've been out and about and you've been
Understatement.
Really connecting with a lot of the things that are in the news medium and in the wire. But this is a big one.
It really is. It really, really is.
It seems like this is a watershed moment because when we're talking about legalizing another substance, and specifically marijuana, this isn't the pot of yesterday. This is a complete different dynamic altogether.
Yeah, and you make a really good point right out of the blocks here, and that's that this isn't the same marijuana that existed in the 60s and the 70s.
Right.
I had an opportunity to talk with Dr. Harold Calunt, who is a senior doctor at University of Toronto. He studies toxicology, pharmacology, and he said it's about 5 times more potent today than it was 60 years ago when he first started, studying the substance. And so I was talking to him just even as a mom. I said, hey, doctor, I have 2 little ones. 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, and I said, should I be concerned? Like, let's say I take my kids to the park, and let's say this is legal.
Smoke.
Yeah, I said, should I be concerned? And you know what he said to me? He said, you know what? 20, 30, 40 years ago, I would have said, nah, you don't have to worry about it. But he said, but today, he said, I have a real concern. And I think that's probably one of the biggest critiques of this legislation is how is it going to affect the developing mind of the next generation? It's not the only critique, but it's a big one.
Well, when you start, you bring up a great concern, because when we look at the law right now, and this is, we're talking about legalization versus criminalization, and there's a difference between those, because I think a lot of times we get that mixed up. Can you kind of unpack that for us?
Yeah, well, criminalization means, like, for example, let's say that you have a 13-year-old who gets caught with a joint. Criminalization means that they would be charged and they would have a criminal record for life that would, maybe stop them from being able to travel to other nations, that type of thing.
Right.
So that's criminalization. Legalization means that if you get caught doing something that's against the law, that, you kind of get a ticket, like a parking ticket, you know what I mean? And so, basically people who are articulating around this are saying, listen, let's not make this criminal, let's make it legal, but not criminal. And there's lots of different voices weighing in on this, but that would be the difference between legalization and criminalization.
And now, to leap off on that point, because when we start looking at that and protecting our children, protecting our next generation.
Yeah, I want to talk about that.
The level that you were talking about, the strength and the potency of this, and being able to regulate this, talking about from a lawmaker's perspective and policing this, this is very complicated, and there's a rush to get this thing done by July the 1st.
Yeah.
What's the rush?
Well, that's the question, And actually, if you watch the debates in the Parliament of Canada, member of Parliament after member of Parliament said this before the vote. What's the rush? It seems like the rush is primarily symbolic, maybe exclusively symbolic, where, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is saying basically we want this to happen on Canada Day, maybe because this is like the new breed of Canadians, I'm not sure. But all across the board, whether we're talking to medical professionals, law enforcers, landlords, there's a lot of concerns coming forward from landlords about how, people growing marijuana legally in their own home for their own personal use, how that will affect, moms and dads having concerns, teachers. And so that is the question, what's the rush? And what's awesome right now, Brian, is that we actually have a window to ask this question again, and that's in the Senate.
Okay.
Right? So right now, the vote isn't scheduled. As of the filming of this show, anyway, things can change in a 24-hour cycle with Parliament. But as of right now, the vote in the Senate, which will then drive it to royal assent and to law, is projected for June the 7th, which means we can still have a voice on this issue. And we can ask our senators to make amendments, send it back to the House, slow it down, stop it altogether. you know, there's still time.
And we really need to get involved with this. And I want to call you to action. You know, we take you there in focus, and we want you to realize that these things cannot be stopped unless we get involved. I know you've got a great contact, Betty Unger.
Betty Unger, yes.
Could you tell us a little bit about that?
I would say she is the leading voice bringing common sense knowledge into this discussion in the Senate. She is a senator, so if people want to get more informed about how this affects young people's brain developments,
Yes.
how all this type of stuff, you know, she's the one to talk to. So I believe her website is bettyyunger.ca, but I'm going by memory. So Google her name and you'll find her.
And I think that's fantastic. I'm very concerned about the development of the brain, because we're talking about this being legalized for 18-year-olds and then moving on to...
And every study, Brian, shows that the brain is still developing right up to 25 in the most executive level functions.
Yes.
And our government's wanting to make this legal at 18. You know, so we have to talk to our leaders about this.
You know, this is too important for us to just let sweep under the carpet and just come on July 1st and say, oh, Canada, you know, how great this land is. We have to get involved. Well, that's your In Focus. But up next, Dave faced a lengthy prison sentence, but is given a lifeline that changes his life. Take a look.